welcome to the latest episode of Om-gnosis, the Occult South Asia podcast. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to talk rather than us have a guest. We'll have a guest in next week's episode as well again I think we have maybe two, maybe three more episodes remaining. Today I want to talk about AI and its applications for a field like Occult South Asia studies. So first, if you don't know me already, I'm Keith Cantú. I'm a research affiliate here at the Center for the Study of World Religions at Harvard Divinity School. And about 2 years ago, I first started to kind of get exposed into this world of AI. I got invited through LinkedIn to participate in some model training. It was a company called Snorkel AI at the time. And to be honest, I tell many people this, I thought it was a joke. Most people know, okay, from ChatGPT or other, models that there's this thing out there called AI, and most people associate it with a chat bot, that you talk to and you have conversations with, and it can help you, know certain things. They also know very clearly, as you might know, that it can help you make really, really silly videos, very funny cat videos, especially those are funny political videos that can, be the darker side as well, as we've seen this year. And also AI slop, that whole category as well. And, many of my colleagues in South Asian religions and, elsewhere, other fields, have rightly pointed out that these chatbots are subject to a lot of hallucinations, right? And sort of misguided information. And so I had actually first been learning about ChatGPT while a visiting assistant professor at St. Lawrence University in Canton. And there was this big kind of red alert meeting where the faculty and the teachers, the, student leaders and everything, they were all coming together to talk about the forthcoming wave that is AI and how it will affect universities and the humanities and so on. So fast forward 1 year later from that, I guess this would be, 2024, getting into 2025, the beginning of that, I started getting these notifications from LinkedIn. Hey, we know that you have this expertise in religious studies, or you have a PhD, you have this information. Why don't you come and help us try to trick AI, try to train AI and make it better? And so I was like, okay, this is interesting. And, I am, at that time, I was actively on the job market, searching for, extra opportunities and side gigs and all of these things, especially to make some extra money for some upcoming field travel that I did in India over the summer and Bangladesh as well. And so I was like, okay, let's see how it works. And at first, it was a lot of simple tasks and, basic things like how can you, create a question that AI will get wrong and then mark that question accordingly, like how did it get to this wrong answer and so on, some simple processes like that. And then what happened from there over the summer is I got notified, or somehow I found on the internet this AI model training company called Outlier. And with Outlier, I started to see, okay, there's actually something more going on than just, trying to trick AI or, trying to be smarter than it or ask it a question that it doesn't know on some obscure topic. Because with the Outlier, what certain projects, that I was assigned to with that, and unfortunately I can't get into details because a lot of these things have confidentiality clauses and so on. And so, as any of you all know, if you, have any experience in academic life or in writing or, even any kind of obscure subject, like maybe you have an interest in occult sciences or, yoga or tantra, you know that there are so many things out there that AI just doesn't know. It doesn't have the right language skills yet. It doesn't have the right manuscript knowledge, all of these things that will make tons of errors. And so that can be very lucrative for someone who wants to say, hey, you don't know all of these things, and here's how I can grade you and say, guess what, AI? This is why your piece of writing sucks. And so, that was basically my job, over the summer as this kind of side gig while I was conducting research and so on. And what I want to sort of encourage with that is that it shows that AI is much more than just the hallucinations, or rather, the hallucinations as they occur, they can actually lead to opportunities for people who are trained and who have expertise to correct these hallucinations or to try and make the model better. And so, this basically leads into, over the summer, Outlier got bought out by Meta, and there was kind of a whole kind of political thing that I was not so much aware of. I was just kind of tasking that was basically, leading to an exodus of these trainers away from Outlier and into new platforms. And one of those platforms ended up being Mercor. And if you go on Mercor and their website and see what kinds of job descriptions are available, you'll see that, they're training AI in tasks like law, medicine, sciences, coding, but also creative writing, religious studies, you name it, sociology, different languages, and all of that. And so I think it's, important, and this is me on my soapbox now, but just, as someone who benefited from this kind of side work and, training these models, I think that it can give huge economic benefits to students and researchers, although I'm well aware that this is problematic because, if the AI can do the job obviously better than what, what the human beings can do, then that leads to huge, economic chaos and, lots of changes and layoffs and all these things that are, potentially possible. Now, I would argue that if you can use it intelligently, or rather, it's not an argument as much as it is a posit, right? A strong opinion that based on this experience, I feel like I can claim. That claim is that I don't think that AI can replace the human scholar. I don't think that AI can ever replace the human researcher or translator. It definitely cannot replace the ethnographer. It cannot replace textual philology or studies like that. And it cannot replace expert level analysis. I'm very convinced at that. And so this sort of idea that, all of a sudden AI will take over the universities and, maybe some administration can sort of see that, oh, well, we don't need professors anymore. I think that that is completely just insane. It just doesn't make any sense. And so how can scholars and how can human beings harness this new technology, and how can they actually show that human beings are needed, and how can they show people who don't have an idea about these things, who are claiming, oh, it's the singularity, all of these, AI can do everything better than human beings can. Those people don't know the humanities, okay? So how can humanities scholars properly actually say, hey, no, we are here and we know more than AI, or at least we can control and harness AI in a way in which other voices, in the podcast sphere or other, kinds of public, media and so on, as they're claiming that, well, the AI can already do everything better. How can humanities represent and sort of step up and say, well, wait a second, like there's something that you're missing here. And I can't tell you how many podcasts that I watch since, starting some of these side gigs. I had sort of done a deep dive into this space, and I can't tell you how many of these sort of podcasts are out there that just claim that AI already can do all of these things. So yes, it can do lots of things, but what exactly can it do, and what exactly can scholars and interested researchers, independent thinkers, readers, translators, what can you all do that can actually, show that this narrative about somehow AI being better is problematic? And I'm not saying everyone has to do that. I'm just sort of saying that there is this way that AI makes sense in the humanities, and where I think a lot of the narrative on AI has completely ignored the humanities perspective, but in the wrong way. It goes much deeper than just, oh, well, it hallucinates all this stuff and it makes up stuff. So, obviously it's not real scholarship. Well, there's more than that. And I want to probe that a little bit in this episode, and I want to anchor the discussion a little bit into occult South Asia and religious studies in general, just so we have this kind of, case study or application in which we can talk about these topics. So I have basically noted about 5 things that AI has to offer a subfield like occult South Asia or religious studies in general, the humanities. One is the ability to understand texts better in their original languages through transliteration and word lookup. How can it do that? How can it do it better? Well, human beings already look up a dictionary. We already consult online dictionaries, those of us who work with texts. We already consult online tools. So what does AI offer that is better than these tools? Well, the claim is, well, it's not better because it hallucinates. But that misses a very important piece of this puzzle, which is called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. What that means is that AI can be tethered, it can be anchored to specific domains of knowledge and trained to not go outside of those domains of knowledge. So if you actually put it in a dictionary, for example, and you say, don't leave this dictionary. You're only going to be based on this dictionary. Your entire realm of knowledge is limited to this dictionary. It will stay in that dictionary, and it will only take what's available from that dictionary. And if it hallucinates, it will only hallucinate within the scope of that dictionary. Does that make sense? So then you can actually expand this sort of pool of retrieval augmented generation. You can expand what it is capable of pulling from, slowly and slowly, to make sure that it actually is pulling from accurate results. And the way that you can do that is by grounding it in established scholarship that is already there. And language is a really good example of doing that. And so I can actually show you some examples of this right now that I prepared. So I've been developing this tool called LipiSource, and it's completely free to use. I mean, if you use it a lot, you can get tokens or something, but it's totally not required. Most of this stuff is so inexpensive as to just, be out there already in the world. And so if you go here, you can just, go down, scroll down, you can pick your language, and you can see here I have just a Greek text, for example, because I mean, I can read the Greek alphabet, but I don't read Greek texts. It's not my specialization. It's not what I can dive deeply in a conversation or anything like that. It's not what I've spent my academic career doing. And so if I encounter a Greek passage like this somewhere along the line, and I want to understand it more as someone who has specialized instead in, say, Sanskrit or Bangla, Tamil, then how can I do that? Well, these tools are available even as a non-specialist to at least get an idea of what's going on. And so what I can do here, here's a passage from, let's see, I guess the Corpus Hermeticum or Poimandres. And what you can do here is you click go, and then you'll see here is a transliterated output, and then it also generates a translation. Now, this translation, again, is not just Google Translate. Oh, here are the, words that come together and make a sentence. It's also not just your basic chatbot, the general knowledge that ChatGPT has, or Google has, or Claude has, or whatever you use. What it is actually a conversation between translators. And so what I've been doing is using context window to basically create AI personas that only specialize in a bounded realm of knowledge. So for example, here's a Greek lexicographer, a Greek semanticist, a Greek pragmatist, and what they do is they correspond with the language that you're translating into, which also is configured. So I had to configure English in that way. They communicate with each other and then they determine a better translation. Is it a perfect translation? No, it's not. But what it is something that can be configured, can be taken, can be analyzed more, and you can also get the justification for how this translation is taking shape. And so if you look up here too, there's another way through looking up words where, let's say I want to understand what a word means. Well, you can click here, somatikon, of the body, pertaining to the body, corporeal, physical. I think that's right from my limited knowledge, but if I want to be sure, well, I can look it up in a dictionary and search it in these online dictionaries or study tools or, other functions. Now, this is sort of just one way of approaching this topic. There are many other ways of approaching this topic. And so, you know, this brings me to number two. Okay, I've talked about translation councils, and I want to emphasize that it's not a replacement for human translation, right? But it can help with processing large amounts of material quickly or to get a general idea kind of the, task at hand and where we're going with understanding language. Let me give you a practical example of that in the field that I do. If I have this PDF, I've been working on this yoga diagrams project that is part of the Center for the Study of World Religions. And the work on that has required, working in Tamil, Hindi, Bangla, Sanskrit, English, even Telugu, which is not one of my specialized languages. And so what I've had to do is sort of, explore a little more and try to figure out what exactly is going on. And so let's say I have a passage or a PDF of a yoga text that talks about a diagram that's happening. Then what I can do is actually take that PDF and then I can process the document. And processing the document basically pulls some of the text from it, and then it allows me to analyze that text more in detail, similar with what we saw with the Greek text there. And so you'll see this here. Okay, it pulls it. Sometimes there are issues with the OCR, but I've been trying to correct it. And here you can look up words, and let's say I want to see what any of these words are, even Sanskrit words that are rendered in Tamil, shishar. Okay, it's going to actually pull it up. Disciple, student, follower, pupil, and then you can search it in the, in the dictionaries from Sanskrit, shisha. So here is, just kind of one example of engaging this material, and it also can be expanded to graphics. And so, I've been expanding this sort of technique or technology of understanding text into understanding captions as well. This is the diagram that goes along with the text that we just saw in Tamil, which is about being unified with the universe through these processes of negation, basically. And this is the similar process, but through these techniques of understanding the 12 kingdoms or chakras in Sabapati's terminology. So another way in which this can work is through manuscript reading and paleography. Now, this is something that I've been just starting to get into. I have looked at graphics and, extracting text from different kinds of graphics. And along the way with that, I've been looking at manuscript readers as well. And it's not something that is completely come to fruition yet, but it is something that I am exploring. And how can you explore these things? Well, I'll give you a little window into what's going on in the back end. So, what is the research that is being used to inform the front end, which is the website that you see? Well, that includes paleography processing. And so, for example, I checked out this book that was available at the Harvard Library at Burnell, or by a scholar named Burnell. And in this book, there are basically Southern Indian script samples of various paleography that you can use and look at. There you go. You can see them right here in the back end, so that now when I put in a manuscript like this, it can slowly read these various variants and, tell me what they are, okay? Because AI hasn't been trained on these things. And that's the thing, is that anything that AI hasn't been trained on, it will likely hallucinate or, give some sort of erroneous result. And so that becomes all the more important to try to train it if you want to use it to make life easier. Now, otherwise, it's going to be useless. And it always needs that human touch and that human kind of dimension to really, you know, be tailored to the specific task at hand. I had mentioned graphics as well. I mean, going back with the Tamil uh, example that I had shown you. This is from this yoga diagrams, this forthcoming book that's coming out. Now, I have translated most of these already on my own. And what's interesting, though, is to look back and confirm some of the translations actually helps at times, or to give kind of a wider context or an idea. And sometimes I'll use the lookup words function and I'll get, an idea about a word or a function or something that I didn't know previously. And this also extends to grammar and grammatical tools. So, you can use AI to rapidly isolate grammatical texts and put them into actually tables or formula, basically reorganize or reorder information so as to make it more usable. Like here's a Sanskrit grammar browser, and if you're interested in Tamil, you can put in a Tamil text or an image, and then it will basically output and parse the grammatical forms. It will actually bring the model in line with Fabricius's dictionary and numbers associated with verbal forms and roots there. So another one that aspect of this that I did want to share, which is language games and other kinds of interactive content. So with language games, this is kind of something that I've more recently, been getting into as, with some AI work, I've been able to get involved in some coding, and I don't have much of a programming background, although, I mean, I guess I did help program a robot in middle school, but that was like Visual Basic, these really elementary languages. And I never really went further than that, even though I, kept up with my computer skills and all of these kinds of things and, have an interest in technology. But the tools that are available now for people are just, unreal. You can do things without a programming background that you just simply could not do 2 years ago. And I can give you just an example about that briefly. I've put up 3 games here on LipiSource, and you can click them here, language games. Here's one where you actually take control of this elephant and you learn different Tamil suffixes. And I took these from Effa Wilden's grammar of Old Tamil for students. And here you can actually kind of be quizzed on these different verbal forms. And you can see that I need to practice it more. See if I can get another one. Mun. Oh, this is an assertive particle for sure. And then I get the gem. Okay. So this is just one example. I also have a Sanskrit game that quizzes you on Sanskrit verbal paradigms. And then I also have Bangla, a game that quizzes you on the Bangla script. And you can actually learn the Bangla script by embarking in this kind of fantasy, fun world based on Middle Bengali. And it will tell you, give you the phoneme, and then you have to kind of determine the transliteration and help you learn in that way. So just kind of some fun ways to learn languages. And why am I showing you this? It's not to brag, it's to show you that you, as a viewer, can also create these new and interactive ways of learning things that are unique to your specific domain that you're operating in. For here, this might be relevant to a field like Occult South Asia, where you want to learn more about Bangla or more about Tamil or Sanskrit or something. But it could easily be, you want to learn Arabic or Greek or Hebrew or any other language that strikes your fancy, Italian, Spanish. So all of these things, right? Um, so that is just kind of one thing that I wanted to share with that. And also not even just languages, but also interactive content. And so, in working with these side gigs, I was able to actually get experience in how to vibe code and program other kinds of games that don't even have to do with language. And I had made a game based on Agrippa. And Agrippa, Cornelius Agrippa, if you know, he was this, Renaissance occultist from around the 16th century. And he pioneered or authored these 3 books of occult philosophy in which you have these spirits of the planets and they have intelligences and they have, different sort of names, divine names attached to them. They have actually magic squares that are kind of attached to them. So, I was sort of burnt out from making 3 language games and decided to figure out, okay, well, how can I create a narrative game that helps you learn the world of this text in a way that's still grounded in the history and the literature of Agrippa, but is still entertaining and interesting. And so I think now there's a way in which you can kind of get beyond software or get beyond games that are very, very general in scope and actually kind of hone in on something that is uniquely interesting to you or something that you want to explore and something that can be practical to your needs. And so in this case, I'm giving you examples from Occult South Asia, or the occult sciences, because that's what this podcast is. But really, I mean, the sky is the limit. And so, I want to leave you with some tools to engage this at the end here. And these include Claude Code or OpenAI Codex. And if you search on YouTube, you can find numerous tutorials on how to use them. Basically, they work in what's called your terminal, window, or you can download a different terminal window called Warp. It's like an app that will help you actually, give you commands that will help if you need some sort of beginning starter advice, or, kind of you make a mistake or something and you need it to do some kind of quick correct. And you basically load up Claude Code in one of these terminals, and then you can talk to it like a human being and ask it to make you things that it couldn't make you, that earlier in previous generations, I mean, even just a few years ago, you would have had to code all of these things yourself and program that. And maybe you as watching, you as the watcher or, audience for this, maybe this is completely old news and you all already knew this before, but it's groundbreaking for, a field like the humanities, because you can now take this knowledge that is incredibly, you know, refined and nuanced and has taken, decades, for many people to research, wherever you are in your research career. And then you can actually transform it into other modes of learning and other modes of interactive content that, suit your needs and can, have big implications for students as well. If you're teaching courses or, want to give a presentation, you can even create whole presentations through these code mechanisms. And again, this goes back to this point. Hallucination is a problem, right? It's going to come up with all kinds of crazy ideas and other kinds of things, and I'm aware of that. But the more information that you give these models as retrieval augmented generation, again, the more that you give these models, the more that they can actually pull from established bodies of work, bodies of scholarship, and can present accurate results. I mean, a great example of that is the Dharma Mitra project, and Sebastian Nerdig, he and Kurt Koitzer, he actually, both of them, they had pioneered this project along with, the help of many others. And now you can, translate full Sanskrit shlokas and get tons of information, contextual information from, Oliver Helvig's digital corpus of Sanskrit, and, pull in other bodies of Sanskrit texts that have been digitized and, get paradigms and all of these things. And the hallucination there is very limited. And I think that if you develop new ways, right? Because obviously a field like Occult South Asia goes far beyond just Sanskrit, and what you research likely goes far beyond just, a niche like Occult South Asia. And so what you can do is tailor these apps and program them with the information that you need to anchor, and then from there they can develop outward from that. And that, I guess, for me has been the biggest revelation, and I wanted to share that. Another revelation is Gemini. On Google, Gemini has this context window from basically the whole internet, I mean all of Google. And so you can ask it to give you little snippets of code that then you can use in these interactive games and apps and so on. And, maybe that's something that would take us far afield. I'd have to give a kind of a whole talk on how exactly to do that. But it's pretty amazing. I mean, even if you don't want to use an app like Google Gemini to develop your interactive content or whatever your idea might be, you can still use it to get this vast context of language and so on. And so, in fact, that is how I was able to use basically the admin tools of LipiSource to create a whole range of personalities, is through this process, just gradually and gradually. And so I have an etymological lexicon, morphology, syntax, phonetics, paleography, literature, hermeneutics, pragmatics, semantics, for basically every language. I've been getting into music and sound as well. I mean, the implication, is also there. I mean, you could do for art history, visual arts and things like that. And so if you can go into any kind of language, then you can see that these are configured with very technical personalities that just deal with that scope of the language, and then they talk to each other. And where do you get that information? Well, you can program it yourself because this is going to be the anchor of the design that you're doing. But you can also get help from contexts that are already available, whether that's a printed material or book that you are then converting into a personality, or it can be, something that is generated, but you're also watching it to make sure that it's accurate. And so, when I put this into Google and I see, okay, what's it coming up with Bangla in terms of graphemics, like how to learn the different kind of squiggles and ways in which conjuncts are formed and so on. Well, it gave me Bidashagore's script reforms, Bangla Academy spelling, Shiddhamatrika origins, opaque and transparent literatures, excuse me, all of these things, and then operating protocols, and then it basically creates a scholar. Juktashor Shilpi. So this person is just the architect of the conjunct. This is all that they do. And so then when you translate or look at information, then this graphemics specialist can talk to the specialist in the language that you're translating to. It's not just English. You can translate into French, into Spanish, into, all these things. And so my point is to basically just open the door a little bit and to, hopefully give you some information at the tools that are out there for the study of even a subfield like Occult South Asia, much less, or how much more all of these other kind of, bigger fields that are taking shape and taking root all around us. And I think that this is all the more important since there is this sort of stereotype, and I often feel this. I mean, maybe many of you all who are watching have come across this before. There's this kind of stereotype that people who are involved in these education, these exchanges between, let's say, South Asia or Europe or North America, and South Asia and so on, global North, global South, and all these things, that it was in the context of exchanges in which the authors and the actors on, let's say, the European and North American side, they didn't really know the languages that they were taking certain ideas from and integrating them into, other forms of occult practice, or, a process that I've called translocalization. People have called it many other things. Carl Bayer in the last episode, intercultural transfers, you know. So there is this kind of, I think, a stereotype, or maybe even just this kind of lingering, like, well, okay, they didn't really know the languages, and so there's this, whole other world that's out there. And while that's partially true, I mean, there are exceptions that, that show that certain of these actors did actually engage languages like Sanskrit or Hindi, for example, even Tamil. It's, it remains true that the amount of information that you can access through other languages now, or other bodies of information that were not available to people who were involved in these exchanges, 100 years ago, not even 5 years ago. I mean, this makes actually the potential for something new. And I can only imagine that people 100 years from now who are, maybe looking at this video or trying to make sense of, you know, Occult South Asia in the year 2026, they're going to be looking at this and saying, wow, people had this whole world available to them. Did they make use of it, right? Did they care to look at all of these things? It's like the turn of the 19th century where you had, people like Max Muller and, all these Indologists who were starting to translate, for the first time a lot of these materials from Sanskrit and Chinese, other languages into European languages, and these texts became available for the first time. Some of them, some people looked at them, some people didn't. But then there was this whole other context as well, of the people who were producing these texts and what they were going through and the traditions that they were coming out of and the practices that they were engaged in, many of which didn't always get represented in these translated texts. But, you know, that was a limitation that was sort of bounded by that time. And I guess what's interesting to me now to sort of, tie this up in a little bow is that that limitation is no longer here, or at least it's here, but it's much more minimal, probably far more minimal than it's ever been before. And so that leads to, I think, new avenues of knowledge, new frontiers. Ethnography is a big one, right? Because not everything is accessible through text or through digitization. You have to experience or understand certain practices. Uh, as well, many practices are kept secret for whatever reason, or they're part of an initiatory structure, or they're part of, a specific community with certain norms and certain sort of, standards and, you know, limitations sometimes based on gender or based on, social class, based on all of these things. And so I think it just kind of points to the fact that with these tools available, it's not the fact that AI will replace scholarship. It's the fact that scholars actually now need to look at these avenues in which humans are really driving the conversation and are really driving the narrative forward for the future. And if more people can sort of, jump on board and capture that energy, then, I can only imagine that we're going to see a huge proliferation of new software and new kinds of ways of understanding the world that were previously impossible. So I hope this was an interesting kind of segue, a little bit of a, diversion from our normal programming, but I look forward to seeing you all again at our next interview, and thanks for watching.